Isn't it common sense for a wife to have children? Infertile women are useless. Mary, get out of here. My husband, Ken, berated me as I returned home after a long absence. He glared at me with contempt, blocking my way into the house with outstretched arms, leaving me standing in the doorway holding my smartphone. It's your fault for leaving me alone for so long in the first place, my husband said accusingly. I had been staying with my parents for about a month for personal reasons. I had just thought I could finally return home, but this was the state of affairs with my husband. Well, this isn't your home anymore. I already have a new partner. I glanced down at my feet and saw familiar shoes on the doormat. I slowly lifted my head, glaring at my husband. Oh, you finally noticed, huh? That's right, it's your sister, Anna. I'll be living here with Anna now. Unlike you, she's beautiful and has a great figure. You wouldn't even think you're sisters, my husband said with a smirk as he stood in the entranceway. I couldn't help but bite my lip, even surprising myself. I was used to being compared to my beautiful sister, but it felt so unpleasant when my own husband pointed it out. Eventually, my sister came out from the living room, rushed over to my husband, and conspicuously linked arms with him. My husband looked at her affectionately and said, I've decided to have Anna bear my child. I'm sorry, Mary. It seems like you're infertile, so I'll be the one to get pregnant with Ken's child. My sister directed a pitiful gaze toward me. Then, my husband waved his hand at me as if shooing away an animal. Come on, you're in the way. Get out of here quickly. This isn't your home anymore. In a cold voice, I said. Huh? You're the one who's leaving. That house is about to be demolished. Huh? My husband frowned, probably not understanding the meaning of my words. He exchanged glances with my sister, and both of them were puzzled. Actually, I had known for a while that my husband and my sister were having an affair. And I was aware of their plans to take over the house. So, I was well prepared for this. I was determined to take everything away from my husband. I reaffirmed this resolution in my mind. At that moment, my sister immediately raised her voice as if mocking me. Hold on. What are you talking about? This house belongs to our father, right? He wanted you both to live here when you got married, didn't he? So, this house is in our father's name. You can't just demolish it as you please, my sister said triumphantly. So, I told my sister. Certainly, this house was originally in our father's name. However, the ownership has already been transferred. What do you mean? My sister pulls a face. But the next moment she blew up and said, Manami, I'm not going to play that hand. Mary, I'm not going to play that game with you. Don't bullshit me just because you were disappointed that your husband was taken away from you. My husband joined in with his sister. You're lying because you're jealous of Anna, aren't you? You're an infertile woman. You infertile woman. They both didn't believe me and made fun of me. But then, the house is in Mary's name. I heard a voice from somewhere. Who is it? My husband looked around nervously. But my sister seemed to recognize the voice immediately and shouted at me. Wait, what was that just now? It's our father's voice, right? I then showed them my smartphone that I had in my hand. Yes, it's Dad. I've been on the phone with Dad since earlier. In fact, when I came home, I had put my smartphone on speaker mode. The person on the other end of the call was my father. In other words, my father had been listening to the entire conversation between my husband, my sister, and me. My father-in-law, why? Both of them were stunned. My husband and sister had wide eyes as they stared at the smartphone. My father began speaking again. I'm disappointed in Anna and Ken. Both of you put on such good faces in front of me, and I fell for it completely. He must have been truly disappointed. My father sighed on the other end of the phone. Then my husband whispered to me in a low voice. Hey, what's going on? Why are you connected to my father-in-law? However, I ignored my husband and said loudly. Huh? Why did I let Dad listen to our conversation? Hey. Keep your voice down. My husband looked flustered, but I continued speaking to both of them with a blank expression. You both know that I went back to my parents' home to take care of Dad, right? My husband and sister nodded slightly. They both knew that I had been staying overnight to take care of my father, who was living in my hometown and had fallen ill. Mom has already passed away, and my older sister couldn't come back home because she's too busy with work. But you see, the reason I went back home wasn't just for that. It was also to report something to you. Report? Yes, a report that both you and your sister are having an affair. At this point, my sister trembled and asked, "So, Dad?" I looked straight at my sister and said, "Yes, Dad knows everything." When did he find out? My sister asked me with a pale face. So I said, long before today, and proceeded to tell them the circumstances that led me to discover the affair. I began to suspect the affair when Ken started taunting me for not being able to have children. Ken had wanted children since we got married. But since I wasn't getting pregnant, he grew frustrated. He eventually started calling me infertile and blamed everything on me. Well, it's obviously your fault, isn't it? You're infertile, so you can't have children. What's the point of having a wife who can't have children? I had no choice but to leave you to ensure I have descendants. But just saying infertile doesn't identify the cause. I asked you so many times to undergo infertility treatment together, didn't I? But you prioritized your job and never seriously considered working on infertility treatment. You kept saying that having children was the wife's responsibility, and you didn't listen at all. When I retorted to my husband, he looked away from me. It was probably awkward for him since it was true that he had consistently refused infertility treatment. So, I turned to my sister and said, I thought about it when I saw Ken behaving unreasonably. I started suspecting he might be having an affair. What are you talking about? Well, he keeps avoiding reality while saying he wants children. Blaming me alone won't solve anything, right? It just seemed odd that he was unfairly making me the villain. And that's when I found out that at the same time, my dear sister was secretly in contact with Ken. How did you find out? One night, Ken came home drunk and left his smartphone on the table before passing out. I saw a creepy message from my sister saying, "Today was so much fun," full of heart stamps. Stop it, my sister blushed with embarrassment. It's quite dumb to have an affair with your younger sister's husband and then feel embarrassed about it. I never wanted to believe that my own sister would go after my husband, but I had to get to the truth. So, I decided to hire an investigator. And guess what? The evidence started pouring in. It looks like Ken and your sister have been seeing each other for a long time. I brought all the gathered evidence with me when I returned home. So, what about Dad at that time? My sister asked, and from the other end of the smartphone, our father replied. I've seen all the evidence, and I've heard Mary's side of the story. The fact that Ken mistreated Mary and that you were trying to have an affair with Ken to take over the house. To teach you two a lesson, I suggested a plan to demolish the house and kick you out. Father's voice was filled with anger. It was only natural for him to be angry since both my husband and my sister had betrayed me while I was taking care of my father during his illness. After being scolded by my father, the two of them looked awkwardly down. So, I thought they would reflect on their actions and apologize to my father. However, father-in-law, isn't it still a wife's job to have children? It seemed like my husband was an irredeemable scoundrel. Despite my father's furious anger, he shamelessly uttered those words. I cheated because it's your fault, Mary. Your infertility is to blame. There's no point in staying married to a woman who can't have children. Neither Anna nor I are at fault. My father fell silent. He must have been utterly exasperated, scolding them so vigorously, only to hear me being blamed for everything. As for my sister, despite initially appearing remorseful when her affair was exposed, she quickly regained her confidence once she was back with my husband. That's right. Mary, who can't have children is at fault, so why make a fuss over a little affair? Besides, whether the mother is Mary or me, it doesn't make a difference to Dad when it comes to grandchildren. However, my father shouted, "That's not the issue. Your thinking is wrong. Apologize to Mary and separate immediately." Despite his escalating tone, my husband and sister remained unfazed. In fact, my husband showed no remorse and defiantly declared, "In that case, I'll divorce Mary. I don't need an infertile woman or this rundown house. Anna and I will live our lives together from now on." Hey, Ken, planning to run away? Wait. Apologize to Mary properly. My father tried to stop my husband, but Ken just laughed heartily and disappeared into the living room with my sister. No matter how angry my father got, there was nothing he could do over the phone. Nevertheless, my father continued to speak to my husband through the speaker, but my husband ignored him, hastily packed his belongings, and left the house with my sister in no time. Left all alone, I slowly sank onto the living room sofa. The fatigue hit me like a wave as soon as I was by myself, and I couldn't bring myself to stand for a while. It was such a harsh experience to go through, especially after returning home after such a long time. I had expected this to happen, but losing my husband to my own sister was still a shock. "Are you okay, Mary?" my father asked with concern. Right, I was still on the phone with my father. I quickly picked up my smartphone and put on a smile, saying, "I'm okay, Dad." "I'm sorry, I couldn't do more to help, Mary." My father sincerely apologized to me. "It's okay, Dad. You've been a great support. Thank you so much." I had nothing but gratitude for my father. Despite being in poor health himself, he had stood up for me. Then I told my father, "Don't worry, Dad. Ken and my sister will definitely regret this." I was confident in this, not just putting on a brave face. That's because I held a certain fact that they didn't know. 1 month later, the divorce was successfully finalized, and I claimed alimony from my ex-husband and sister. My ex-husband was full of complaints until the end, saying, "It's your fault for being infertile," but since the fact of his affair remained unchanged, he reluctantly agreed to pay the alimony. My sister, too, initially hesitated, saying, "I've never heard of claiming alimony from family," but it seemed she was eager to marry Ken as soon as possible, so she paid the alimony in a lump sum. Afterward, my ex-husband and sister rented an apartment and moved. The house they rented seemed too spacious for just the two of them, but it appeared they chose a property with many rooms, perhaps in anticipation of having children soon. I went ahead with the plan to demolish the house my father had given me and moved to a nearby apartment. The vacant land was transformed into a paid parking lot, providing me with a small but steady source of income. For some time after that, I lived calmly without any contact with the two of them. However, several years later, I would unexpectedly cross paths with them again. It happened in the waiting room of a maternity clinic during my first visit. To my surprise, I encountered my ex-husband and sister there. They seemed as close as ever, holding hands while sitting together. I didn't want to get involved with them any more than necessary, so my initial intention was to ignore them. After completing the reception process, I sat in a distant chair, deliberately averting my gaze. However, it appeared that my ex-husband noticed me sooner than I anticipated, and he began to approach me. "Oh, look who it is, Mary," my ex-husband said in a tone that clearly indicated he was trying to tease me. "It's been a while," I replied curtly. I intended to leave the place promptly, but my ex-husband grabbed my shoulder and continued to speak. "Hey, Mary, what brings you to the maternity clinic? Meeting here of all places is quite a coincidence. I bet an infertile woman like you is still single, right? Isn't he such an insensitive man? Even though he's my ex-husband, I can't help but feel embarrassed that I know someone so rude." I tried to shake off my ex-husband's hand and get up. But my sister was in front of me, blocking my way. "You think Mary could get married? After all, this child is ugly." My sister also sided with my ex-husband and mocked me. So I let out a big sigh and told my ex-husband and sister. Hey, can you stop making assumptions like that? Huh? I got remarried, you see. What? And it looks like I'm pregnant, so I came for a checkup today. Pregnant. My ex-husband and sister were left dumbfounded. Then we looked at each other for a while, and I thought my ex-husband had a nasty smile on his face and said to me, "You're infertile and you think you're pregnant? Don't lie to me. I get it. Maybe it's what you call an imaginary pregnancy? She just gained weight, but she thinks she's pregnant. It's so funny that you're so delusional that you're coming all the way out here to get a checkup." My sister joins my ex-husband in a vulgar laugh. All the pregnant women around us were glancing at us. I was so embarrassed. It seems my ex-husbands still have no common sense. But I thought now was the time for revenge, so I asked them. By the way, have you two had children yet? What? Apparently, it was a question he didn't want to be asked, so my ex-husband looked away and fell silent. My sister, on the other hand, looked at me with a disgusted look on her face and said, "None of your business," and glared at me. My sister then said, as if trying to put my ex-husband in a good mood, "We're just trying to make a baby at our own pace, not rushing into it, right?" "Oh, yeah. We just started. So far, we've just been taking our time as a couple." My ex-husband looked at me with a stern face, and I said firmly, "I mean, you haven't had children yet, have you?" "Well, Ken is sterile, so it's difficult." "What? Seedless?" my ex-husband exclaimed. But, as expected, he thought it was a bad idea to use the word seedless, right? My ex-husband blushed and held his mouth with his hand. "I'm sorry, what do you mean by seedless?" My sister beside me looked at my ex-husband's face. No. It's just her imagination." My ex-husband shook his head vigorously, denying it with a strained expression. "It's not imagination. It's the truth. I know why my sisters are here at the obstetrics and gynecology clinic. Even your sister had trouble getting pregnant, right? But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't have a child. After all, Ken is infertile. He accused me of being infertile and refused infertility treatment, but in reality, Ken himself is infertile." "Oh no! Ken is infertile. Is that a lie?" As my sister stood there with a fussed face, my ex-husband interrupted from the side. "Wait a minute. How do you know I'm infertile? I've never even been to the hospital." My ex-husband came at me with a bright red face. So I laughed and said, "Oh, you don't remember, do you? You refused to let me go to the hospital, but you did give me a specimen. I had it tested." Specimens, come to think of it. I guess he remembered that once in the past, he had only given me a specimen at my request. My ex-husband's face turned blue. "The test results revealed that you're the one who's infertile. Quite ironic, isn't it? You ridiculed me, calling me infertile, yet you turned out to be the one with fertility issues. By the way, I had the test done too, and everything was normal. That's why I'm pregnant now," I said, and my ex-husband shouted at me, almost lunging forward. "Damn it! Why didn't you tell me I was infertile? If I had known, I could have taken appropriate measures." The surrounding patients and nurses turned their shocked faces towards us. I whispered to my husband, "Well, I did plan to tell you once we knew the results. But back then, you were bullying me, and on top of that, you were cheating, right? You weren't exactly engaging in civilized conversation with me." "But keeping such an important thing from me is unacceptable. I thought you were the problem, so I believed that I could have children if I switched to Anna. Therefore, I deliberately didn't tell you. So that you would regret it someday." "You! Mary, you've really insulted us." My ex-husband and sister snapped, advancing towards me with furious expressions. At that moment, I was so consumed with rage that I couldn't care less about the onlookers. My ex-husband raised his hand to strike me, but... "Hey, you two! How about you calm down? A man stepped in front of me, restraining my ex-husband's hand. It was John, my new husband. This is a clinic, and there are other patients here. You've been harassing my wife loudly since earlier. Can you please keep it down? John's tone was calm, but there was an underlying anger in his voice. In fact, he had come with me for the pregnancy test and had been watching our situation from a distance. Shut up. It's none of your business. This woman here insulted me, calling me infertile. And she's been hiding the fact that I'm infertile, deceiving both me and Anna. My ex-husband glared sharply at John. Despite being furious just moments ago, he had become completely subdued. However, his expression soon turned to one of realization. And he fell silent, no longer saying anything. John then spoke to the ex-husband in a soothing tone. So what if it's infertility? Isn't the purpose of marriage more than just having children? Whether there are children or not, aren't couples supposed to support each other? At that moment, the sister pushed aside the silent ex-husband and lashed out at John. Hey! You're Mary's new husband, aren't you? You talk so big, but do you understand how I feel? I can't have children because my husband is infertile. Do you understand that? You're getting all high and mighty just because you have children. But you'll regret it later. Children born from an ugly woman like Mary will definitely be ugly too. Both of you can go to hell. It seemed that the sister was infuriated upon learning about the ex-husband's infertility. She grabbed John by the collar, tears welling up in her eyes as she hurled insults. However, Anna, stop it. For some reason, my ex-husband turned pale, desperately trying to restrain his sister. Why? Why should I leave this disrespectful guy alone? He's insulting us. I won't be satisfied until he gets what he deserves. Despite her resistance, the ex-husband managed to separate her from John, pleading with her with a desperate expression, "It's enough already." I was left bewildered by the unfolding chaos before me. But eventually, the ex-husband forcibly dragged his sister out of the waiting room and hurriedly left, as if fleeing from something. Later, the mystery was solved when I heard from John, the man I remarried. In fact, he runs a company, and her ex-husband worked for a business partner of his company. Moreover, her ex-husband's company has been performing poorly for several years. If he was to cut off business with the company, its survival would have been in jeopardy, so it is not surprising that the ex-husband became impatient. The reason he suddenly became quiet at the obstetrician's office was to protect the company and himself. However, John showed no mercy to my ex-husband, who had treated me so badly. He went to my ex-husband's company and tried to report to the president about what he had done. There, however, John learned a surprising fact. According to the company president, my ex-husband had been repeatedly late for work and had a poor work attitude, and was already considered a problem at the company. Furthermore, it was revealed that he had been having an affair, and as expected, my ex-husband was transferred to a new position. His salary has been drastically reduced, and even at the new location, there are bad rumors and people look at him with a cold shoulder. And my sister and my ex-husband, who at first was so excited that they were going to have a baby, are now constantly quarreling with each other. It was no wonder, since it had become clear that my ex-husband was infertile, they could not have children, and their relationship had reached its lowest point. Having paid alimony to me, both of us had very little savings and were forced to live in poverty. They said that even if they wanted to leave each other because neither of them had any money, they couldn't, and they were living in a constant state of bickering. This finally made my ex-husband and my sister regret their decision. Rumor has it that the ex-husband has told people around him that he should have taken better care of Mary, but it is too late for him to feel remorse now. I hope the scum will stay with each other until the end. On the other hand, unlike my ex-husband, John takes very good care of me. I am so glad I married him because he seems to get along with my father and we are close enough to go out for drinks together. My first marriage was a disaster. But thanks to that, I met the man I married again. We have a beautiful baby now and I'm so happy.